and welcome to our special coverage on the escalating tensions in the Middle East. Today we will discuss the Israeli strikes against Iran, a message or a display of power. And together we will explore the recent strikes targeting Iranian facilities, analyzing whether they aim to achieve tangible strategic objectives or merely tactical moves to save face amidst tensions. And join us on this exploratory journey to understand the impact of these strikes on regional and international relations and their potential ramifications for security in the area. And Israeli media have reported that several occupation soldiers were killed and more than 50 people were injured, with 15 in critical condition, after a truck rammed a bus station in Gilo, north of Tel Aviv. Israeli ambulance services said the truck struck a bus stop at a major intersection in central Israel. The Israeli occupation forces have stated that the circumstances surrounding the incident are still under investigation. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has announced a comprehensive investigation into an incident at Gilo in Tel Aviv. And in his statements, Netanyahu said that his government are awaiting the results of the investigation into the incident and are determined to pursue those responsible for the attacks.
Israel's border with Lebanon. In fact, on the day that Israel began its ground operation next to our border with Lebanon, we asked them specifically, please leave this area so you're not.
And the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has claimed the United States has involved in the overnight Israeli attack on the country. And Araghchi claimed that the U.S. had provided an air corridor and equipment to the Israeli Air Force for the Friday night attacks on Iranian military targets, which Iranian officials say caused limited damage. On its part, the United States, which has pressed Israel to avoid targeting sensitive Iranian energy and nuclear sites, joined other countries in calling for a halt to the cycle of confrontation between Israel and Iran.
پشت سر مقاومت همچنان خواهد ایستاد و هیچ کس نباید تردیدی در این خصوص به خودش راه بده. ما پشتیبان مقاومت بوده‌ایم.
And Iran's media outlets cited the country's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, as saying that the Israeli attack on Iran should neither be downplayed nor exaggerated. Khamenei added that Iranian officials should determine how best to demonstrate Iran's power to Israel after the Israeli attack on Iran 2 nights ago.
خطای محاسباتی رژیم صهیونیستی باید به هم بخوره. اینا دچار خطای محاسباتی هم نسبت به ایران. کیفیت کار رو مسئولین ما.
And today we are joined by Ratiba El-Nacha, the member of the Palestinian National Action Committee from occupied Jerusalem. And welcome, Ms. El-Nacha. Thank you for joining us today. And
أهلا فيكي وشكرا.
Thank you. Welcome. And Ms. El-Nacha, do you consider this incident part of a larger escalation, or do you consider it an isolated event? Indeed, Israel, since the beginning of this war, more than 1 year ago, seeks the expansion of the scope of the war to become a regional war. They want to involve Iran by any means in this war. That's why they direct their fingers of accusation against Iran in any incident. Despite the fact that the Iranian side informed both the United States and the United Nations and some permanent UN member states about their lack of desire to escalate this war or to interfere in this war. But Iran is always ready to defend its sovereignty and to respond to any attack. Yes, I think Israel seeks the expansion of the war by this attack. But from another perspective, as we have seen before, the Iranian response will be very patient and very accurate, that doesn't allow a dramatic expansion of war in this region.
Ms. Nacha, what are your expectations for the Israeli government's political and security responses to this incident?
Do you mean the incident in Iran or the incident in Israel?
No, I mean the incident in Iran.
في إيران نعم. نعم يعني بالأمس كان الإعلام العبري يتحدث
Yesterday, the Hebrew media
الإيرانيين كانوا يبحثوا عن
said that the Iranian citizens were looking for the Israeli attack in Tehran sky, while the Prime Minister and the Minister of Defense were hiding in their shelters. So Israel expects that the response against this attack will be massive from the side of Iran. But Iran does not want a quick response. Iran said that they will respond wisely and very patiently, so they wouldn't allow any escalation in the region. Iran doesn't want to be involved in the conflict in the region. They also announced that what happens, even on the Lebanese front with Hezbollah, or even what happened on October 7th, was not planned by Iran and doesn't have any relation with Iran, despite the logistic support of Iran to Hezbollah and despite the support of Iran to its allies on the long term. But Iran doesn't want to be part of this battle directly. But again, Israel wants to invest in this attack as much as they can to provoke Iran to get a response from them, to make them contradict their agreement with the United States. We know that Blinken's visit last week to the Middle East included a very important title or a headline, which is the size of the Israeli attack against Iran and the targets in Iran. They will be carefully studied and they will not affect the course of events regarding the American elections or would lead to an escalation in the region. So Israel was committed to its pledge to the United States in return of US promises that we do not know of, but there will be a reward from the United States to Israel if Israel was committed to the agreed targets in Iran. Nonetheless, there are voices inside Israel asking the power of deterring that Israel used to have in the region to maintain its power in the Middle East. Hence, there should be another attack after this proactive one. Maybe it's postponed until after the American election so it wouldn't be affected.
We would like to thank you, Ms. Ratiba El-Nacha, the member of the Palestinian National Action Committee from the occupied Jerusalem, for speaking to Qnews today. And as the conflict between Israel and Iran intensifies, global powers like the United States, Russia, and China find themselves in a complex position. With Israel launching precision strikes against Iranian military targets, we explore how these nations navigate their alliances and interests and what the responses mean for the broader geopolitical landscape in the Middle East.
The escalating conflict between Israel and Iran has drawn the attention of global superpowers, notably the United States, Russia, and China. Following a series of Iranian missile strikes on Israel, Israel conducted targeted airstrikes against Iranian military installations. The U.S. quickly reaffirmed its support for Israel, urging Iran to exercise restraint. In contrast, Russia has cultivated a deeper relationship with Iran, particularly in the context of the Ukraine conflict. Russian President Vladimir Putin's recent discussions with Iranian leaders have indicated a strategic alignment that could influence their responses to Israeli actions. Meanwhile, China maintains a cautious stance. It is historically aligned with Iran, but remains wary of overcommitting amid escalating tensions. Chinese officials have emphasized diplomatic solutions while avoiding direct condemnation of Israeli actions. Beijing's economic interests in both Iran and Israel compel it to strike a delicate balance. Should the situation threaten vital oil supplies or involve significant economic disruptions, China might amplify its rhetoric against Israel. As these powers navigate their interests, the situation remains fluid, with the potential for further escalation on diplomatic resolutions hanging in the balance. The interplay of support and restraint among the US, Russia, and China will be critical in shaping the future dynamics of this conflict.
And now we are joined from northern Lebanon with Mr. John El-Faghali, a researcher at the Mashq Center, and Brigadier General Adel El-Mashmoushi, a military and strategic expert from Beirut. Welcome, Mr. Faghali, and welcome, General El-Mashmoushi. I will start off first with Mr. El-Faghali. How do you assess the impact of the recent Israeli strikes on the ongoing tensions in Lebanon?
Good afternoon, first of all. I believe that this recent strike on Iran by Israel is to show or to prove that Israel has upgraded, let's say, or wants to show the world that it has upgraded from a regional power to a major power. That Israel is no longer just, engaging with proxies, let's say, like Hamas and Hezbollah, but is also capable to engage, if it chooses, with full sovereign nations like Iran, even as powerful as Iran. As mentioned before, I don't think I don't think it's in Iran's interest to be involved fully in a regional war right now. In itself, it would rather have its proxies do its war for it. So I think that's more of the case that we'll see, and this is, of course, will be evident in Lebanon with more strikes from Hezbollah, which will escalate in the region here, and Israel, of course, will amplify its strikes on Lebanon as a consequence.
And General El-Mashmoushi, do you consider these strikes as part of a larger strategy to mitigate the Iranian threat in the region? Can you hear me, General Mashmoushi?
Hello?
Apologies, General Mashmoushi, we can't hear you, but we go back again to Mr. El-Faghali. And how can the major powers like the United States play a role in reducing tensions in the region?
For now that the new Middle East is on the horizon, maps are going to be redrawn in the near future in the region. I think major powers such as the US and the EU could gather see what everyone wants out of this and try to find the best possible outcome, especially for damaged entities such as Lebanon and Gaza.
And we have back with us again General El-Mashmoushi. And do you consider these strikes as part of a larger strategy to mitigate the Iranian threat in the region, General?
Welcome to you and to your audience. Of course, the strike has a strategic nature that exceeds just being a mere maneuver, especially that it targeted the Iranian air defense and maybe the missile bases and long-term missiles that may reach the occupied Palestinian territories. Of course, this operation seeks to pave the way for further operations by striking these missiles will facilitate the movement of the aviation in the Iranian skies, which opened the room for further targets. I think all of us believed that this would happen a while ago, that the first strike wouldn't target civilian targets like the oil refining stations and the nuclear interactors or the nuclear project of Iran.
And still with General El-Mashmoushi, we would like to ask you another question. And how do you evaluate the significance of the recent Israeli strikes on the Iranian facilities?
الإيرانية. I think this strike, despite what's being marketed, I think this strike was carefully studied. So it's strange that it was dealt with as if the number of the casualties or the number of the victims is 4 or 6 or something like that. But actually they used 100 airplanes and they targeted 20 targets. So it's impossible to have only this number of victims. The most dangerous thing is that the United States of America and Israel managed to prevent Iran, if we can say this, from response. Hence, Iran will first absorb this strike and they will not respond to avoid further strikes, and they may seek to prevent being dragged into a wider scope war, which will push Iran to stop responding from this to this strike.
And we go back to Mr. Faghali. And what do you think, Mr. Faghali, are the potential long-term implications of these strikes for regional stability and relations between the U.S. and the Middle East?
This, of course, will be clearly indicated after the U.S. elections once a new administration is rushed in. But of course, as we've mentioned before, the U.S. will, for the foreseeable and for the long future, have Israel's interest above everything else. So the relationship, let's say, between the U.S. and the Middle East and Middle Eastern countries in general will not take into compromise the interests or the well-being or the safety or the security of Israel. So it depends on the outcome of this war. It depends on the future of this war. It depends on the new map that will be generated out of this war. And I think we could have a clean slate. We could just open a new chapter with the U.S. and the Middle Eastern relationships. It depends on so many factors right now. But for the moment, the U.S. election is the landmark that all experts, let's say, are eagerly waiting for to assess the future of the ongoing instability in the region.
And going back to General El-Mashmoushi, how could you think that these strikes actually might impact ongoing tensions in Lebanon and ceasefire negotiations in Gaza, in your opinion?
It's normal that, in my opinion, Iran tries to avoid being involved in an all-out war and a direct confrontation with Israel. That's why they will resort to a war by proxy. This is by adopting side pressure methods either on the Lebanese front or in Gaza front in order to practice pressure on the Israeli side to accept diplomatic solutions. That's why I expect that in the upcoming days they will further launch more missiles from Lebanon to Israel and the ground offensives on the Lebanese borders. And they will even have land operations inside the Lebanese territories, and this happens also in Gaza. Things are started to be clear in the past 2 weeks, and the pace of the aggression is accelerated, and they depend on qualitative operations in the Israeli depth, either 50 kilometers away or even reaching the capital, Tel Aviv.
Mr. El-Faghali, the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu stated that the strikes were precise and achieved their objectives. How credible do you think this statement is, or this claim?
I think after what we've seen in Lebanon and with the pager thing, the assassinations of the Hezbollah leaders and all that, I think Israel have shown that they can be precise, that they can be strategically advanced, let's say, on their opponents, and of course such statement will come out, and I think that we can take it into consideration and we cannot take it very lightly. It is quite credible because the experience have proved it. The experience in Lebanon, the experience in Gaza have proved that Israel can and will be precise and will be timely in their strikes.
Back again to General El-Mashmoushi, and what kind of response do you anticipate, General, from Iran following these attacks, and how might they affect the regional dynamics, do you think?
In fact, personally, I don't expect a response from Iran to this strike, because in my opinion, Iran will be as patient as possible, the painful patience, in order to avoid being dragged by the Israelis or to prevent the Israeli entity from further strikes. It's worth mentioning that it was said that there were 20 targets and 100 airplanes, but the question is, where are the Iranian air defenses and S-400 and all of these things? I believe that all of these things will be future questions, unless, and this is a very weak possibility, unless Iran responded, and this depends on the amount of losses in the military bases and the missile and drones facilities in Iran. If the losses are great, Iran will resort to a postponed response. And maybe the response will be similar to before, meaning that Iran may not have to be involved in this war, because being involved in the war today is not in the best interest of both parties. Maybe Israel seeks igniting this conflict. However, the United States is keen on preventing an all-out war, especially at this time and precisely before the elections. The same applies to Israel, because Israel after finalizing all of its fighting operations in the Lebanese front.
Thank you very much,
شكراً
General.
جزيلاً.
Thank you so much. That was John El-Faghali, the researcher at the Mashriq Center from Northern Lebanon, and Brigadier General Adel El-Mashmoushi, a military and strategic expert from Beirut. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us here tonight. And as we conclude our episode, we find ourselves facing profound questions about the future. Will these strikes be a turning point towards possible de-escalation between Iran and Israel, or will they lead to further escalation? And this concludes our special coverage. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok, and at QNewsEG to stay informed. And for real-time updates, connect with us on the UMS digital platform. Watch it. And thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.